They say grief changes people, but with my dad, it didn't just change him, it made him vanish while still standing in the same room. After my mom passed, it was like someone turned down the volume on him. He went from being this solid, dependable presence, Mr. Fix-It, Mr. Sunday Morning Coffee, to someone who spoke in nods and half sentences. At first, I thought it was just the weight of losing her. I mean, how do you bounce back from losing the love of your life? But over time, the silence started to feel less like sadness and more like avoidance. It was in the little things. He stopped looking people in the eye. He couldn't sit through a family dinner without getting up mid-meal to check something in the garage. He gave up watching his favorite news programs because, according to him, they didn't tell the truth anymore. I brushed it off at first. We all process differently, right? But something about the way he avoided my questions, even the simple ones, like how he met Mom or what their first date was like, started to wear on me. His answers were always too vague, too rehearsed, like he was sticking to a script he'd memorized a long time ago. And then there was the photo. It was tucked in the back of an old bookshelf when I was helping him reorganize the guest room. An unassuming Polaroid wedged behind a stack of dusty VHS tapes. My mom, smiling wide in a sun-drenched park I didn't recognize, standing next to a man who wasn't my dad. A man whose face had been scratched out with what looked like a ballpoint pen. I asked about it, and Dad didn't even flinch. He just said, "That was before us. Doesn't matter now," and shoved the photo in his back pocket like it was a receipt. That's when my stomach started doing this thing, like a cold little knot just sitting there. Then came the anniversary. It was the third one since she died. Normally, we'd light a candle, maybe share a memory. This year, he told me not to come over. Claimed he had errands. That alone was weird. He never turned down company on that day. But something told me to drive by anyway. I parked across the street, thinking maybe I'd surprise him with flowers. Maybe we'd cry together for once instead of pretending it didn't hurt. I wish I hadn't. Through the half-open garage door I saw him. Not doing errands. Not fixing anything. Just sitting on the floor, knees up to his chest, holding something in his hands and sobbing like I've never heard a man cry before. Guttural, broken. It was the kind of grief that didn't look new, it looked infected. Like it had been growing in the dark for years. I didn't go in. I waited until he went back inside. Then I did something I hadn't done since I was a teenager. I snooped. Not because I wanted to catch him in something, but because I felt like I had to. Because whatever he was hiding wasn't just his burden anymore. It was already bleeding into mine. It's strange, the way your own home can start to feel unfamiliar when you know something isn't right. I went back the next day with a tight smile and a casserole, playing the part of the dutiful daughter, like nothing had changed. But everything had. I couldn't unsee the image of him crying in that dim garage, clutching whatever secret was eating him from the inside out. I didn't ask about the night before. I knew he'd lie, or worse, shut down completely, and I wasn't ready to confront him without knowing what I was actually confronting. So I waited. I waited until he left for his usual Thursday grocery run, the one where he pretended he still had a list and a purpose, even though he always came back with the same sad bag of frozen meals and off-brand toothpaste. I told him I'd stay behind and tidy up. As soon as his car pulled out of the driveway, I went straight to the garage. It looked like any other suburban garage at first. Tools hung neatly on pegboards, boxes stacked in half-hearted attempts at organization. But it was cold in there. Not temperature-wise. Emotionally. Like whatever he had been hiding had changed the air in that space. And I knew. It was in there somewhere. The first few boxes were nothing. Old Christmas decorations, rusted nails, boxes labeled Priska School that still had my second-grade handwriting on them. But then I saw it. An unmarked, navy blue lockbox, shoved behind a row of paint cans, like it had been deliberately buried. The kind of thing you don't store with tax documents or family keepsakes. The kind of box you put things in when you don't want them found. It wasn't locked, just latched, which, somehow, felt even more ominous. Like he wanted it to be found someday, but not yet. Not now. Not by me. I opened it. On top was a stack of letters, worn, yellowed at the edges, bundled with twine like something out of an old romance movie. But these weren't love letters. Not to my mom, anyway. They were addressed to a woman named Elena, a name I didn't recognize. The handwriting was his, pages and pages of small, slanted script, filled with apologies, confessions, desperation. I read one, then another, and another. Elena, I can't stop thinking about what happened that night. If I could go back, God, if I could undo it, I would. I miss her too. You know I do. But Priska can't know. It would destroy everything. Priska. Me. I felt the ground shift beneath me. There were photographs too. A younger version of my father, arm slung casually around a woman with dark hair and sharp eyes. Elena, presumably. In one photo, they stood in front of a tiny house I'd never seen before. In another, he was holding a toddler who wasn't me. I flipped through them with shaking hands. The timeline didn't make sense. These weren't from before my mother. They overlapped. There were receipts, postcards, even an ultrasound picture, dated the year after I was born. The implications hit me in waves, each one colder than the last. This wasn't just a secret. It was a second life. He hadn't lost one love. He'd buried another. And worse, he'd made a choice to stay silent, to let me grow up with half a truth, maybe less, to build a version of our family that was comfortable for him, safe for him, while pretending the rest didn't exist. I wanted to scream. I wanted to burn the whole garage down and erase what I'd seen. But more than anything, I wanted answers. Not from the man in those letters, the one who made a mess and ran from it, but from my father. The man I thought I knew. The man who had lied to me every day of my life and still called it love. But I didn't go to him. Not yet. I needed to see how far the lie went first. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The letters were in my bag, zipped up like they might leak poison if I left them out too long. But the poison was already in me, dripping through every childhood memory I'd ever clung to. I kept hearing his voice in my head, reading bedtime stories, making pancakes, coaching me through my first heartbreak. I wanted to scream at that version of him. How could you? How could you pretend all this time? The next morning, I went back to the box. I brought it into my apartment and emptied it carefully, laying each piece of evidence out like a crime scene. Because that's what it felt like, a crime. Maybe not legally, but emotionally. A betrayal this deep doesn't just shatter trust, it unroots your identity. There were over 20 letters, all written between 1996 and 2004. That entire span of my early childhood, when I thought my dad was working late, or out with friends from the shop, he was writing her. Elena, sometimes from hotels, sometimes from a post office box, always from the shadows of a life he had no intention of integrating with mine. He said he loved her, over and over, in ways that sounded so unlike the man who raised me. More raw, more reckless, the kind of love that burns things down. And then I found the picture that made my hands go numb. It was a girl, maybe 6 or 7, standing in front of what looked like the same little blue house from the earlier photos. Her smile crooked, her hair in messy pigtails. Taped to the back was a note in my father's handwriting. My other star. She looked so much like Priska it hurts. I sat there for a long time, just staring. Another child, another daughter. And she wasn't a secret by accident. He had known. He had chosen not to tell me. Not to tell anyone, as far as I could tell. There was no mention of this girl in any of our family photo albums. No half-sister stories. No, when you're older, I'll explain. Just silence. I wanted to believe there was some noble reason. That maybe he was forced to keep it quiet. That maybe Elena had cut him off and said stay away. But the letters didn't say that. They told a different story. One where he begged to be part of both lives, torn between 2 women, 2 children, and ultimately choosing the one that made him look like a better man. Me. I was the clean choice. The publicly acceptable daughter. The one with the house and the birthday parties and the illusion of wholeness. And that little girl, she was his guilt, his silence, his invisible second life. My whole body felt like it was buzzing with rage and grief. Because I hadn't just lost my mother, I had been robbed of a sister. Of a truth that could have shaped me, saved me from years of confusion I thought was mine alone. And for what? His comfort, his reputation. I kept reading, desperate for something that would make it make sense. But the more I found, the worse it got. He hadn't just lied to protect me. He had lied to protect himself. Every omission, every half-truth, every time he said, Some things are better left in the past. That wasn't wisdom. That was cowardice. And I didn't know who to be mad at more. Him, or myself, for never asking harder questions. But now I had a different question, one that burned hotter than the rest. Was she still out there? Was the girl in the photo still living her life somewhere, maybe never knowing I existed? Did she get letters too? Did she know she was loved, even if it was from the sidelines? Because if she didn't, if she grew up thinking she was forgotten, then I had to find her. Not for him, not even for Elena, but for us. I didn't plan it. I didn't script what I was going to say. I didn't want to give him the benefit of preparation or let myself rehearse the pain into something too polished. Because none of this was polished. It was jagged and ugly and bleeding in places I didn't know I could bleed from. It was a Saturday, and I knew he'd be home, probably folding laundry like he always did when he didn't want to be alone with his thoughts. The house looked the same from the outside, but the second I stepped inside, it felt like walking into someone else's memories. His voice called out from the kitchen, casual, like I was just popping in for coffee. Like I hadn't just uncovered a second family hidden between oil cans and drop cloths. "Priska!" he called out, drying his hands on a dish towel. "Didn't know you were. Who is Elena?" He froze. Not a flinch. Not a gasp. Just stillness. The kind that screams louder than any answer ever could. His eyes didn't meet mine at first. He stared at the floor like maybe it would give him a way out. "You went through my things," he said eventually, low and almost ashamed. "Don't do that," I snapped. "Don't turn this around. Just tell me. Tell me who she is. Tell me about the little girl in the photo that wasn't me." He sat down slowly, like the weight of it had finally settled on his shoulders. Like he'd been waiting for this moment and dreading it in equal measure. "She's your sister," he said, voice gravel thick. "Half-sister. Her name's Liana." I laughed. A single, sharp sound I didn't even recognize. "You gave her a name. How nice of you. Did she get birthdays? Stories? Did she get you?" His face crumpled a little. "It wasn't that simple." "It never is it?" I spat back. "Nothing's ever that simple when you're the one lying." He looked at me then, really looked at me. And for a second I saw fear. Not fear of being caught. Fear of being known. He reached for the glass of water on the table, but his hand was shaking too much to hold it steady. "I didn't plan for her," he said. "Elena and I, it was complicated. Your mother knew in the end. She found out. She made me choose. And you chose me," I said, not as a comfort, but as an accusation. "I chose this," he said, waving a hand around the kitchen. "I chose stability. I chose a life that wouldn't fall apart. And did it work?" I asked, my voice flat. "Because I'm standing here, and I feel like I've been living in a goddamn fairy tale where the prince was two-timing and the castle was fake." He didn't answer. He just pressed his palms to his face like he could scrub the truth away. But I wouldn't let him disappear into himself, not this time. "I had a right to know her," I said. "You didn't just lie to me. You stole something from me. A whole piece of my life. Of hers. Of Mom's. You let me grieve her without ever telling me what she had forgiven you for. Or what she hadn't." He choked on something. Maybe a sob, maybe a confession. "I wanted to tell you so many times. But I kept thinking, if I did, it would change how you looked at me. And I didn't want to lose you." "You already did," I said, and it came out like a whisper I didn't even know I'd been holding back. There was a silence then. A big, aching one. He looked smaller somehow, like the truth had shrunken him, carved away the image he'd built so carefully over the years. And I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't even feel satisfied. I felt hollow. "I'm going to find her," I said finally. "Not for you. For me. For her. Because we both deserve to know who we are without your version of a story getting in the way." He nodded once, eyes glassy. "I understand." I turned to leave, and just as I reached the door, he said something I didn't expect. "She looked like you when she laughed. You both have your mother's smile." It gutted me. Not because it was tender, but because it proved he knew. He'd seen the connection all along, and he'd still chosen silence. For decades. I didn't look back. Some truths don't need a response. They just need to be faced. Grief has layers. I used to think it was a straight line. Denial, anger, bargaining, acceptance, whatever. But it's not. It folds in on itself. It doubles back when you least expect it. You think you've made peace with one truth, and then a deeper one surfaces and ruins everything all over again. In the weeks after I confronted my father, I didn't go back to his house. He called once, left a message I never played. I couldn't stand the idea of hearing his voice in that tone, soft, apologetic, trying to sound like the man I used to trust. That man didn't exist anymore. Maybe he never did. But I didn't disappear into bitterness either. I couldn't. Not with the weight of her hanging in the air. Liana, the sister I never knew I had. I didn't know where to start. I had her first name, an old photo, and a few dates and locations from the letters. Clues scattered like breadcrumbs across a life I was never meant to find. I went through the return addresses, the postmarks. I Googled. I searched social media. I even joined a couple of online forums for people trying to reconnect with a strange family. Every time I typed her name, it felt like I was trespassing on someone else's story, but I kept going. Because maybe she deserved to know. Or maybe she already did. What if she hated him? What if she knew everything and wanted nothing to do with me, the other daughter, the one who got his presence while she got his absence? But still I searched. And then one day I found her. Not through the letters, not through some grand, dramatic discovery, just a tagged photo on someone else's profile. She was older now, obviously, mid-20s, maybe, with the same sharp jawline and deep-set eyes I saw every time I looked in the mirror. She was standing in front of a coffee shop in Portland, arm around a friend, wearing a denim jacket with pins on the collar and a bright yellow scarf. She looked happy, full, like her life hadn't been defined by a missing puzzle piece. And suddenly I froze. What right did I have to walk into her world now? I sat with that question for days. I didn't message her. I didn't hit follow. I stared at the picture and thought about what it meant to tell the truth after someone else had worked so hard to bury it. And if I reached out, would I just be tearing open wounds she'd already stitched closed? But then I thought about myself, about the years I spent not knowing her, about the empty spaces in my life I'd mistaken for normal. And I realized this wasn't just about what she wanted. It was about what we might have been robbed of. Together. So I wrote her a message. I kept it short, honest, careful. Hi, you don't know me, but I think we may be related. My name is Priska. I believe we share the same father. I recently found out about you. I'm still trying to process everything, but if you're open to talking, or even just hearing more, I'd really like that. No pressure. Just truth if you want it. And then I waited. For hours. Days. Each minute stretched tight with anticipation and dread. I told myself I'd be okay if she never answered. That I'd done the right thing, even if it didn't lead anywhere. But deep down, I wanted her to reply more than I'd ever wanted anything in my life. 3 days later, she did. Her message was simple. I've been waiting for this my whole life. I cried. Not the angry, gasping kind I'd used up on my father. This was quieter, sadder, but also healing. We've been talking ever since. Slowly, carefully. We're not sisters yet. Not in the way that word usually means, but we're building something. A shared language. A fragile kind of trust. She told me her version of our father, and it was hard to hear. But I needed it. I needed the whole picture, no matter how painful. As for my dad, I don't know. I don't know if forgiveness is something I'll ever be ready to give. But I know this. I won't let his choices define how the story ends. That's mine now. Because secrets can bury a family. But the truth, when you're finally ready to face it, can be the start of something honest. Maybe even something beautiful. Some people think the truth sets you free. I don't know if I believe that anymore. Maybe it does, eventually. But first it ruins you. It strips you of everything you thought was solid. It drags every comforting lie into the light. It makes you question not just the people you love, but the version of yourself you built around them. That's what the truth did to me. In the beginning, I thought uncovering my father's secret would give me something, answers, maybe even justice. But what it really gave me was a mirror, one I couldn't look away from. Because the more I learned about him, the more I had to confront what I had been ignoring in myself, the way I had inherited his silence. How I learned to smile through confusion, to avoid confrontation, to protect other people's feelings before honoring my own. That didn't start with a box in the garage. It started with a quiet dinner table, a mother who kept her forgiveness private, a father who looked me in the eyes every day and let me believe the world was smaller than it really was. They weren't villains. They were just scared. And I get it now. I do. It's easier to pretend something didn't happen than to live in the mess it leaves behind. But I'm not doing that anymore. I talk to Liana every week. Sometimes just quick messages, sometimes long phone calls that last until one of us gets too emotional to keep going. We're learning about each other like archaeologists, dusting off old pieces, trying to figure out where they fit. We laugh more than I expected. We cry less than we probably should. It's not perfect, but it's real. And that's all I've wanted. Something real. As for my dad, we're in the kind of silence that's full of truth, not denial. I haven't cut him off completely, but the distance is intentional. I'm not punishing him, I'm protecting myself. Because I'm allowed to want peace without pretending nothing happened. And if we ever rebuild anything, it will be from scratch. No illusions, no edited memories. Just the raw, unvarnished version of who we are now. Sometimes I catch myself wondering what my life would have looked like if I'd never found that box. If I'd just gone on believing in the clean version of our story. I imagine the birthdays, the holidays, the quiet smiles around the table. And then I picture Liana, smiling in that photo, wearing that yellow scarf, and I realize something. I would rather live with pain and truth than comfort and lies. Because at least now I know who I am. I'm Priska. I'm my mother's daughter. My father's consequence. My sister's question mark. And for the first time in my life, I'm not pretending.